اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا. Continuing with the series of Tazkiyah pearls. Please, if your car is in front of the dumpster, please remove it so that they can take the garbage. Jazakumullah khair. There are cones there for a reason, but if you put your car there, you don't mind removing it. Jazakumullah khair. The concept that I'm going to talk about this morning is the concept of rahma. And this is a concept that is critical in association or affiliation with the concept of humbleness. You need both of them, and if one of them is not there, then things don't work. And I'm going to talk about it, inshallah. I can't afford to give it 2 sessions, unfortunately, so I'm trying to compress it into one. Rahma is the main Islamic attitude. It's the main Islamic attitude. Everything in this world is deserving of a baseline treatment of rahmah from you. As a Muslim, everything is deserving of a baseline treatment of rahmah. And that is an important concept to hold on to as we move forward with this. When we talk about rahmah, it is the essence not of the message of the Prophet ﷺ, it is the essence of the Prophet ﷺ as a person. Not only was he described as Rahim, but in essence, he is a Rahma alayhi salatu wasalam. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So at his core alayhi salatu wasalam, this is how you define him. Or this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described him. He replaced his essence alayhi salatu wasalam with an ethic or with a value. He was a Rahma alayhi salatu wasalam. It is the most sensitive test of Islam. It's the most sensitive test. It's not the most specific. Many people can have rahmah. Other faiths and other backgrounds can have rahmah. Anyone can have rahmah. But if you're Muslim, you have to have rahmah. If you don't, then Islam is not there. It's a sensitive test. If we test you for rahmah and there's none of it, then there's no Islam as well. There has to be rahmah. And it correlates with the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you achieve. The closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you become, the more rahmah you're going to have. If you're learning more about your deen and you believe that you are being drawn closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet you have less rahmah, that means you're learning it wrong. You're learning it wrong. Whoever is teaching you is not teaching you it correctly. It's not possible that you increase your knowledge of Islam, become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet have less rahmah in your heart. It doesn't work. There's something wrong with that being the case. Because the more you learn your deen, the more similar to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam you become, meaning the more rahmah you're going to have in your heart, because that is his essence alayhi salatu wasalam. That being understood, there's a certain baseline treatment for human beings that everyone is worthy of. It's a human right. Others may dip under it in the way they treat people. Others may dip under that baseline treatment of rahmah, but you don't. This is the difference between you and between others. The difference between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is that a Muslim will never dip under rahmah, even if the person in front of them does. This is probably the most difficult piece of understanding this concept. This is probably the most difficult piece of understanding this concept. It takes time. Because in our minds, there may be people whom we don't feel deserve that baseline of rahmah. And rahmah as a concept is either it works for everyone or for none. You cannot have an exception with this. With this value, there cannot be an exception. You cannot say everyone is deserving of rahmah, but fulan, this oppressor or this dictator or my ex-husband or fulan who did this. No. This has to be something that is a blanket. You can always go up in the amount of rahmah. You can always go higher. But you can't dip under a certain amount of it. Hence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 2 names. And hence those 2 names are used in the beginning of every surah. The reason that we have it is because there's 2 types. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. There's 2 names. Why? Because there are 2 types of rahmah. There is the baseline rahmah that everything is worthy of. Everything. That everything is worthy of. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, Ar-Rahman. And that is what everyone here has to have towards everything. It's a human right. If you look at the Charter of Human Rights, they don't follow it. Or they follow it selectively, that's their problem. But this is how we understand rahmah. Every living thing, everything is deserving of that amount of rahmah. Now, if you love them, or if you like them, or if they treat you well, or if they've shown you love, or if they've shown you rahmah themselves, then you can go up. And that is His name, Ar-Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows all of His creation His name, Ar-Rahman. Everyone, everything. And those who believe in Him, وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. And those who accept Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, He offers them the extra piece of rahmah. This is hard, because there may be people in your mind who are not worthy of rahmah. Even when it comes to hudud in Islam, even when it comes to the punishments that exist in our deen, even the harsh ones, إنما جزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله ويسعون في الأرض فسادا أن يقتلوا أو يصلبوا أو تقطع أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف أو ينفوا من الأرض. Even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the severe punishments of people who perform terrorism or people who perform corruption on this earth, murdering and stealing, that they may be executed or they may be crucified or even in that, it has to be done with rahmah. It has to be performed. Rahmah exists always in the how. Rahmah always exists in the how things are going to be done. And it always exists in Islam in the what, in what's being done. But sometimes rahmah towards the collective beats the rahmah that's being shown to the individual. Sometimes a punishment will be harsh, not because there's no rahmah towards the individual, but because the rahmah towards the collective is more important. Because we are trying to save the community, the nation, the group of people. So there has to be a harsh punishment to have rahmah towards people. Because if you don't have a punishment that will cause individuals to stay back or step back, then they are going to cause corruption, which is going to ruin the community, which is going to show no rahmah to the collective and to the next generations, etc., etc. So every command Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in this book is filled with rahmah. Even if it's strict. Even if there is punishment, even if fulan is going to be worthy of execution, the way this person is going to be executed is going to be via rahmah. They're still going to be shown rahmah, even as they're being executed, even as they are being taken towards their execution. It's going to happen via rahmah. You know this because we watched the Prophet ﷺ do this. In the collection of Imam Bukhari, when the Prophet ﷺ was brought to him someone who was publicly intoxicated. He was publicly drinking. The punishment was half the number of lashes for zina. This person was going to get 40 lashes. So he got 40 lashes. As he was being lashed, one of the Sahaba said something negative. فَسَابَّهُ أَوْ شَاتَمَهُ. And he said, he cursed him out. He said a bad word about him. يا كذا. The Prophet ﷺ قال don't say that again. فإني لا أعلم إلا أنه يحب الله ورسوله. All I know about him is that he loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Prophet. He's going to be punished. This is important. This is to maintain and sustain the collective ethics within our community. Because we can't have people getting used to walking around intoxicated and drunk in the streets. But it doesn't mean that we're going to deliver this to him without rahmah. It's going to be delivered to him with rahmah. Why? Because that is the baseline. You may not be able to love your enemy. You can't, hence the word enemy. Loving them makes no sense. They're your enemy. So you can't love them. You may not be able to forgive someone who ruined your life. You may not be able to offer them full forgiveness. You may not be able to keep someone who has betrayed you as your best friend anymore. You may not be able to stay married to someone who has harmed you or abused you. But in all of these situations, you are capable of showing people rahmah. You can still show empathy. You can still show compassion. The basis of mercy can be shown to everyone, regardless of what they have done or how they have treated you. You may not be able to show the best ethic because it's hard. I can't show love to someone who is trying to destroy me. I may not be able to be the closest friend to someone who has betrayed me. That's the epitome of the ethic that I can show someone, but I can't because it's difficult, but I do not dip under the baseline of rahmah. Take time today and think about this, because there may be in your heart or in your mind individuals on this planet that in your mind don't deserve rahmah. If you allow for that thought, then you don't have rahmah at all. You have selective tenderness. Hitler had selective tenderness. Shaitan has selective tenderness. Hitler loved some of his family members and showed them rahmah. Shaitan shows some of his followers rahmah. It doesn't make me or you special if we're able to show selective tenderness. Rahmah as a concept, as a value, has to be a blanket value. It has to cover everything. The reason that I'm saying this and the reason that I'm emphasizing this is because what we hope for, what we are trying to achieve in our lives is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah. What we want is for us to be worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah yawm al-qiyamah. This is really all you are doing. Everything that you're doing in your life is designed to achieve one goal, is that when you come yawm al-qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you worthy of His rahmah. And if He sees you worthy of His rahmah, and He smothers you with His rahmah, and you bathe in His rahmah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you're going to be fine. Because nothing that we do will ever add up in any form or manner. It will never add up to deserving Jannah, ever. It's impossible. Because there's no equilibrium here. There's no equality in what we're looking for, in what we're asking for, and what we're offering. He is offering eternity. Fi dari al-rahmah. Within the place of His compassion, within the mustaqar, the source of His empathy. He's offering eternity. There's nothing that we have, nothing that we can offer that will allow us to be deserving of that. And because we can't really do it, then all that we can hope for is to be worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing us mercy yawm al-qiyamah. And if He shows us His compassion subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah, then we will make it. And because of that, the story of the man who wanted to enter Jannah, bi'amalihi, the very famous story, who said, I'll enter Jannah with my deeds. So he was stopped. Deeds? Wait. Let's start weighing out all of your deeds with the blessing of eyesight or the blessing of hearing. All of his deeds not weigh for that, up to that one blessing. And okay, let's start blessing number 2 and 3. When ta'uddu ni'mat Allahi la tuhsuha, the man got the idea, said, no, Ya Rabb, okay, I'm sorry, bi rahmatik. I was wrong. I didn't understand things. قال برحمتي, enter. As the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said, لا يدخل الجنة أحد بعمله. No one enters Jannah with their deeds. فقالوا ولا أنت يا رسول الله. Not even you. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا أنا إلا أن يتغمدني الله برحمته. Except, not even me, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يوم القيامة smothers me with His rahmah. And I am worthy of His rahmah. That's it. There's always going to be a certain amount of rahmah in everything that you do. In everything, even when you're strict. Sometimes rahmah exists within strictness. Sometimes rahmah will exist within being strict. If you have a child, it's not rahmah towards them to allow them to stay up all night and eat candy and marshmallows and not go to school. That's not rahmah. Rahmah is to make them sleep early and get them up early and send them to school and make sure they have a healthy diet. They don't want these things. But it's rahmah to be strict with them, to make sure that they are capable of functioning later. So rahmah does not mean that you let people do whatever they want or walk all over you. No, this is not what rahmah is. That's not what it is. But what he explains to us, alayhi salatu wasalam, is مَا كَانَ الرِّفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ وَلَا نُزِعَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. That rifq, tenderness, rahmah, you put it in anything, it will beautify it. You remove it from anything, it will ruin it, it'll turn it rotten. Everything must have a certain dose of rahmah within it. And that's how you can follow his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, and watch how he treated his enemies, how he treated the people who betrayed him. Alayhi salatu wasalam, there was always a specific dose of rahmah. It wasn't about them, whether they deserved it or not. It was about his ethic, his value, alayhi salatu wasalam, that he carried. That this is what everyone is worthy of. It's about you. So when you make an exception in your mind, when you think of a dictator, when you think of someone that no, they're not worthy of rahmah, you are ruining it for yourself. You are ruining this value for yourself. Yes, they need to be punished. Yes, this dictator must be executed, but it's going to occur with rahmah. They will be treated, even if what if they deprived everyone around them from rahmah? It doesn't matter. What if they didn't believe in what I'm explaining to you? What if they don't believe in this? They're like, no, no, not everyone's worthy of rahmah. Meaning their way of life is that not everybody is worthy of rahmah. It doesn't matter because this is about your belief. This is about your values and your ethics. You believe that everything is worthy of rahmah, so that's how you're going to treat everyone. This is very important. Why? Because we have this very peculiar triangle. The triangle, at the top of it, is the concept of love, which we will talk about at the end of this series, at the end of the month. And then the other two pieces is humbleness and rahmah. And the way this triangle works is of extreme importance. Love does not exist if both humbleness and rahmah do not exist appropriately. If you are not humble, you absolutely do not know what love is. If someone's not humble, then their love is narcissistic and it's controlling, and it's not really love. Without rahmah, there can be no love. Without rahmah, what ends up happening is your barometer goes in opposite directions. One day, you're crazy about the person, the other day you hate their guts, and you want to destroy them. And we see it all the time in courts of law. In the courts of law, what do you think happens in the courts? Two people who were madly in love before now want nothing but to destroy one another because there was no rahmah to begin with. Rahmah, without humbleness and rahmah, love does not exist. What's more interesting in this triangle is that the existence of these two concepts cancel each other out if one of them is not there. If you don't have humbleness, rahmah stops existing. If you don't have rahmah, humbleness stops existing. You need both. In order for them to exist, they both have to be there. And in order for love to exist, they both have to be there. This is how this triangle works. I don't know why. I don't really fully understand. Till this day, I've spent years I don't fully understand. But I'll give you examples because it's very important. If you don't have rahmah, then you're not capable of humbleness anyways. If you don't have rahmah, if you don't have a baseline, you're not capable of being humble. Because humble requires you to see yourself equal to everyone around you. It requires you to see yourself equal. It requires you to see and appreciate people who are doing better than you. And accepting the possibility that most people in your mind will do better than you yawm al-qiyamah. And that they're closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that they are worthy of love and respect because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and respects them subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you don't have rahmah, you absolutely cannot practice humbleness. It's not even possible as an ethic to exist. And if you don't have humbleness, you can't be rahim. You can't. Because what's required for rahmah is that you are humble enough to put yourself in someone else's shoes. You end up having sympathy, but not empathy. You end up having sympathy where you feel bad for someone who's beneath you. Empathy is different. It's not simple. We know that. People don't want your sympathy. They're okay with your empathy, but they don't want your sympathy. You don't want them to. They don't want you looking, saying, "Oh, I feel bad for this poor guy." Miskeen, they don't want that. They don't want your pity. They don't want your pity. No, you don't want people's pity either. Because pity is basically the mutated form of rahmah when there's no humbleness. And people don't like it. When you don't have true humbleness, rahmah doesn't exist. And when you don't have true rahmah, humbleness doesn't exist. You need them both for each other to exist. And then when they both exist, we form something much more beautiful. We form the essence of what Islam is built on. We form the goal of everyone coming to the masjid all throughout Ramadan is to achieve love, which we'll talk about inshallah at the end of the month, and I'll explain why that's important. Now, that being explained and said, how do we define rahmah? What is the definition for it? So it's three pieces. If you understand them, then you can contemplate them over the remainder of the day and see how it works in your life. The Prophet ﷺ says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you achieve true belief until you love for your brother, the other person, what you love for yourself. So the first piece of rahmah is to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, someone else's position. You have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. This is the most difficult part of it all, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, because that requires humbleness. Because I have to be able to say, what if I were in that sinful person's shoes? What ends up coming to mind is saying, well, I wouldn't have done that. I can't put myself in that person's shoes because I would never do that. You wouldn't. There's no way There's no possibility that you would ever do that. Be careful of ever saying, no, I would be careful. You say that, that's almost like a challenge. It's like you're challenging God. It's like you're challenging Allah. Oh, I would never do that. Oh, really? I can't. There's a movie that came, I think, in the 80s called Trading Places. It's based on a novel. I remember watching this when I was a kid. And the movie, it's just, I just want you to understand the idea here. Don't go watch it in Ramadan or anything. Just learn that. It's two aristocrats, you know, one of those people, very rich people. They have a CEO of a company, and he's successful, he's well dressed, he's well articulated, he's doing a lot. And they're sitting there just watching him, and they're happy with how he's doing for their, billion-dollar company. They walk out of their place and they see a hobo, a homeless person walking around bumping into people. And they're chatting and they're laughing, and they say, you know what do you bet that I could get our CEO to become like him and get him to be our CEO? So they bet $1. They bet $1. So the guy started working. He started working against the CEO, his CEO. He started to put one obstacle after the other in his way. One obstacle, and he brought this home, and he cleaned them up, and he started. And by halfway in the movie, they had switched places. And the CEO is now walking on the street. It was Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. And now Eddie Murphy is the CEO. They find out, of course, the plot at the end of the movie, and they bankrupt the aristocrats. So don't worry, it ended nicely. But the idea here is that if the human being can manipulate the life of another human being and ruin their trajectory, you don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of doing this? So when you look at someone and you say, oh, I would never do that, be very careful of ever saying that. Even if what they did is absolutely unimaginable. Which is why we don't learn from the Quran. Because we read the Quran, we hear what Fir'aun did, like, I would never done that. Like, ya akhi, abus idak. What do you mean? Why did he send these verses then? Who was these verses for? If not for you to read, of course you could have done this. Of course, there's a possibility that I would have put in, if I were in this position, I could have done it. Alhamdulillah that he did not put me in that position. Alhamdulillah satarni subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah that my sins are concealed. That he has not actually exposed the weaknesses within my values. That he has not exposed what I am capable of. Alhamdulillah. You see, the only reason that we are walking around as Muslims is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not pushed us far enough yet. That's all. Everyone has a breaking point. All it takes is him pushing us far enough, and then we expose our weakness. He hasn't. Lahu alhamdu wal minna subhanahu wa ta'ala. So never say that. You don't know. The story of Iblis is there for us to learn from. Not to sit down and, the stories of Bani Israel is not so that we can sit and say, look at Bani Israel. No, so that we don't follow the same footsteps, because everyone's capable of this. So the first step of rahmah is that you're able to put yourself in someone else's position, understanding what it meant. If I had done that, had I made the mistake, had I slipped in my life and committed that sin or committed that mistake or fell short in that way. You see someone you see a homeless person standing with the sign at the thing. You don't want to give them money, fine, but don't condescend. You don't know what their life story was. You don't know how they grew up. You don't know what happened to them. I actually feel more bad for them than anyone else in this world. You see, if you're a homeless person in Syria, well, half the Syrian people are homeless at this point anyways. You didn't have much of a potential to begin with. But this poor guy is living in the first world country where the limit is the sky, and this is where he ended up. Out of all the if you ended up in a third world country and you didn't have anything, and you're in a third world country, but you ended up in a place where you could have been an astronaut or a physician and you're standing at a light with the thing. You feel bad. What happened to this person in their lives? This is different from justifying people's mistakes. I'm not justifying people's mistakes. This is very important in Tazkiyah to understand that having rahmah, being able to put yourself in someone else's position, is not equal to saying that it's okay. What they did was okay. No, what they did is not okay. This is wrong. They made mistakes. But rahmah is to be able to understand that I could have made those mistakes as well. I could have made those mistakes as well. And when you do that, you put yourself in their position. Number two, you can feel for them. You can feel for them. Because you put yourself in their position, now you can feel their feelings. You can accept their feelings, which is why you fast. You fast because now this hunger and this thirst and this fatigue and this agony and this tiredness allows you to understand the suffering of people elsewhere who have the same problem. It allows you to feel what they feel. And then number 3, you treat people the way you would have wanted to be treated had you been in their position. That's rahma. That's rahma. You put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is the most difficult piece because you have to get over your ego, which is why humbleness is needed. If there's no humbleness, that piece is gone, rahma's gone. Rahma's gone, there's no rahma. There's sympathy, good for you. Doesn't matter. Animals have sympathy. Dictators have sympathy. That's not. Rahma is different. Rahma is a whole different thing. Empathy is different. You put yourself in their position, you feel their pain, you feel their anxiety, their fear, and then you deal with them the way you would have wanted to be dealt with. Even if it meant that had I been in their position, I would have wanted to be dealt with in a way that would teach me something, that would allow me to grow, not just give me a handout, but actually help me. Actually help me get out of the situation that I am in, which sometimes means I needed someone to be strict with me, or I need someone, but it's all going to happen under the framework of rahmah. There's a hadith, I don't have time to narrate it for you, but I was planning to do that, subhanAllah, today, and I was going to bring the paper, and I said, khalas. There's a hadith called Hadith al-Musalsal bil-Awwaliyah. When you study hadith, the first thing that you sit in front of your shaykh, the first thing he does is he narrates this hadith to you with his sanad, back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Shaykh Muhammad Khair al-Sha'al, hafidhahullah, wa Shaykh Nuruddin Aitar, rahmatullahi alayhi, narrated this hadith to us through Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin and Shaykh Badr al-Din al-Hasani, rahimahullah ta'ala, muhaddith al-Sham al-Akbar. He went through back, this hadith, an fulan, back, and every time you recite it from a shaykh, the wording of the shaykh is the following, وَهَذَا أَوَّلُ حَدِيثٍ سَمِعْتُهُ مِنْهُ. Every shaykh in his narration of the hadith, on every level, will say, this is the first hadith I heard from my shaykh. Going back to Sufyan al-Thawri, وهذا أول حديث سمعته منه عن عبد الله بن عبد العاص رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن يرحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. This is the hadith narrated by Imam Tirmidhi. It's called the hadith al-Musalsal, meaning it's the chain of narration for it, bil-Awwaliyah, being the first hadith that you have to listen to every single time. You sit down to learn hadith, the first hadith that you must memorize and you must know that the merciful are being shown mercy by Ar-Rahman, by the merciful. Show mercy to those who are on this planet. Yarhamkum man fis sama, the one in the sky will show you mercy as well. You want to listen to Rahmah? Just take any story from him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Anything. Wallahi, there's everything about him, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the easiest target. The easiest target for someone who wants to talk about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, just talk about Rahmah. It's so simple. Like it's everywhere, every part of his life. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Imam Muslim narrates to us that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam stood one night in prayer, reciting the Quran. He came to the ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ. If you punish them, then indeed they are your servants. He's talking about those who are kuffar, who are mushrikeen. If you punish them, then they are your servants and they are worthy of punishment for what they did. وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. But if you forgive them, despite the fact that they are mushrikeen and kuffar, فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Then indeed, you are unfathomable, you are not questioned. No one can question you. Why did you forgive a mushrik? You said you weren't going to do. No one can question you. وَأَنْتَ الْحَكِيمُ. You're the most wise. No one can question your wisdom either. And he would recite that ayah time and time again, sobbing alayhi salatu wasalam. يقول Imam Muslim, حتى أرسل الله جبريل قال أن ائت محمد فسله ما يبكيه. Go to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام and ask him, why is it that he is standing in prayer reciting this ayah in tears? والله أعلم به. And Allah subhanahu knows why he's doing it. فيأتيه جبريل فيقول يا رسول الله إن ربك قد أرسلني يسألك ما يبكيك. My Lord has sent me to ask you, what is it that is causing you to cry? فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام أمتي, my people, my nation after me. فقعد جبريل إلى ربه فأخبره. So Jibreel went back to his Lord and he told him. فأرسل الله جبريل. So Allah sends Jibreel back to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. فقال يا رسول الله إن ربك قد أخبرني أنه سيرضيك في أمتك ولا يسوءك. Indeed, my Lord has sent me to tell you that He will make you satisfied with your ummah yawm al-qiyamah and He will not break your heart. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. I'll end with this. Imam al-Waqidi, in his Maghazi, narrates this story on the way to Fatah Makkah. قال فمر الجيش على جبل. The army didn't use the highway to make it to Mecca. They went around because they didn't want Quraysh to find out. So they're going around. They were going through an alternative path. It was very difficult. It was valleys and mountains, the whole thing. So they're going up a mountain. قال فمر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على كلبة تهر على صغارها. He came across a female mother dog that was barking because it wants to protect its young ones. يقول فأمر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جعيل بن سراقة أن يقف أمامها حتى لا يؤذي أحد من الجيش الكلبة وأولادها. So the Prophet ﷺ commanded a man called Ju'ayl and told him, stand here in front and protect this dog. Don't let anyone in the army bother her until the army is gone. So Ju'ayl ibn Suraqa would stand in front of the dog, the female dog, until the whole army passed by, just to make sure that she wasn't bothered. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'een. I can't say that there's an abundance of stories. It's an endless source. His life is an endless source of stories of what compassion and empathy actually is. You absolutely require it. Without it, humbleness does not exist and doesn't work. And without these two, then the basis of our value system, the basis of our ethics as Muslim is not possible. We can't function as Muslims. And the reason that we struggle today is because we don't have this basic thing. So people get divorced, they are going to show rahmah to everyone in the world except to their spouse, except to their ex-husband and ex-wife. They're willing to literally ruin their lives. Why? Because they have no rahmah towards them anymore. If one person in this world is not worthy of rahmah, then you don't have rahmah. You have selective tenderness, and that doesn't mean anything. Anyone can have a selective tenderness. Rahmah is consistent. That's how it's defined. I'll end with that, inshallah. Subhanallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka wa 'azzama ala nabiyyina wa habibina wa qurrati a'yunina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.